I'd like to introduce Vicky from the United States who has multiple sclerosis. Welcome, Vicky.
Hi, Linda.
Could you tell us, Vicky, when you first started to notice MS symptoms?
It was back in 1996, I believe it was. I started having just slight symptoms. My walking was kind of off a little bit. I had fatigue. Um, I think, gosh, it's been so long, and sometimes those are things that you kind of want to forget. But I had, like I said, I had walking problems. My balance was off a little bit. I was really, one of the biggest things that I noticed is that I just didn't have the energy. I was really, really tired. And I was working at the time, and, and I was in kind of a stressful job. And, probably about 6 months later is when I started having problems with my hands and just weakness. Um, and just little things like that. And then of course after I quit working, then things kind of just progressed worse and worse.
And how long did it take to get diagnosed?
It took them about a year because I had the when they did my MRI, I only had one lesion, and what my doctor had told me was that I had the symptoms of MS, but they couldn't really find any clear findings. And then that's when I started having severe problems with my hands, and then my memory, I just started having cognitive issues. And then I went back to my doctor, and um, they did a spinal tap, and from the bands and the fluid, that's when they confirmed that it was MS. And then and then after that, then he put me on the Avonex.
And what were your symptoms like before you found LDN?
Oh, it was miserable. It was miserable. I had excruciating pain with my MS. I was real sensitive. If I lay down and I put a sheet on me, just the sheet touching me would hurt. I was heat cold sensitive. If I'd get cold, I would hurt really bad. If I got hot, I would hurt really bad. Um, I I had cognitive issues. My When people would tell me things and I would try to talk back to them, or I would try to answer them, I it just the words just didn't process right. I mean, I just couldn't get out what I wanted to say. I was starting to lose muscle control in the calves of my legs, to where walking was difficult. Our bedroom was upstairs, and I'd get halfway up the stairs, and it was just a struggle, and I'd have to sit down and crawl to get up the stairs. I had speech problems. I was starting to, when I would try to talk, things just didn't come out right. Um, I was towards the end, I was starting to have some swallowing issues. Of course, I had, bladder problems. Um, the one of the embarrassing things that people don't like to talk about is, unfortunately, if when you're married, you do have, sexual dysfunction issues. Um, I was depressed because I wasn't able to do anything that I used to do, and I just was not happy. I just was not happy.
If you had to rate your quality of life at that time on the scale to 1 to 10, what would it have been?
A 10 being the worst.
10 being the best.
Oh, 10 being the best. Um, my quality of life back then was probably, I would say, maybe a 3.
And what would you say it is today?
Oh my gosh, it's off the charts. It's off the charts. I love life. I can't get enough life. My days aren't long enough. I wish I had longer days to get more things done. I just don't have enough time in my days to do the things that I want to do. And I find myself going out of my way to help people, because I've always been the type of person that whenever anything, and it was a joke with my girlfriends, whenever anything went wrong, or whenever anyone was sick, they would always, the joke was always, Vicky can fix it, Vicky will take care of it. And now now I find myself going out of my way just trying to help people because I feel like I have 10 years to make up because those 10 years when I wasn't doing well, I could barely take care of myself,
Mm.
let alone anybody else. And so I feel like now I feel like that I need to take care and I need to help as many people as I can.
And how did you find LDN?
Actually, it was my husband. He was always, in the evening time when he get home from work, after dinner and everything, I was always, I'd always be on the couch because I wasn't, by the end of the day, my days, I just didn't feel good. So at the end of the day, I was on the couch, and Stephen was always looking on the internet, and he was always going into chat rooms, pretending he was me, trying to see what other what other things were available to people with MS. And he ended up in a chat room, and people were talking about LDN, and he chimed in and wanted to know what it was. And somebody told him to go to the LDN site, and he started reading it, and he printed it out, and he set it on the coffee table, and he said, "You need to read this." And I told him, I said, "Stephen, I said, I've done the shots, I did the Sabri, I did the sodium medrol infusions, I was on, they just had upped my OxyContin, and I told him, I said, Stephen, I said, there's nothing out there that's going to help me. I said, this is what my doctors told me, this is what they have. I told him, I said, I was at the point to where I just didn't care anymore because I just didn't see anything. I just didn't see anything that was going to be good in the future that was going to help me. And he's like, "No, you need to read this." So I threw it away. And then the next day, when he got home from work, he asked me what I thought about it, and I told him, I said, I didn't read it. I said, I threw it away. And he's like, "You've got to read it." So he reprinted it, and I read the first page and a half, and I was livid. I was so mad. I thought, why did my doctor not know about this? So I took it to I actually had an appointment a couple days later, and I took it to my doctor, and she said no. She said, absolutely not. And I asked her, I said, why? I said, look at all the people that are taking it. I said, why would you not prescribe this to me? And she said, it's not FDA approved. I told her, I said, I don't care if it's FDA approved or not. I said, look what's happening to my life. I said, this is not quality. And she said, I can't. She said, I'm afraid of lawsuits. And and I told her, I said, I won't sue you. I said, I promise. And she said, I just can't take the chance. Well, my Avonex, I had to refill my Avonex, and I thought, you know what? Forget it. I'm not going to refill my Avonex. I called Dr. Bahari. I had a phone consultation with Dr. Bahari because my Avonex was like $280, and Dr. Bahari was, I think, like $250. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to save that money, pay Dr. Bahari. I had my phone consult with Dr. Bahari, and at the end of the conversation, because he didn't really say that he would prescribe it, and at the end of the conversation, I asked him, I said, well, will you prescribe this drug for me? And he said, well, that's why you called me. And I said, you're going to write me a prescription? And he said, absolutely. So he wrote me a prescription. I had it compounded, and I was on it for 3 months. And at the end of the third month, I had a doctor's appointment because I was supposed to go back the following month for a follow-up with my doctor because I had just gotten out of the emergency room. And I shined it because I wanted to basically prove her wrong. So I skipped my appointment, and then at the end of the third month, I went in to go see her, and I was sitting in her office. And the minute she walked in, she looked at me, and the first words out of her mouth is, "You're on that stuff." And I said, how can you tell? And she said, what a difference. And you're just the way I looked. And I asked her, I said, will you write me a prescription? She couldn't get her prescription pad out quick enough. And she's been writing my script ever since.
Mm-hmm.
And prescribing it for people.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing, isn't it? So, Vicky, what would you say to other people who take, sorry, that'll have to be edited out. What would you say to other people with MS who are contemplating trying LDN?
Absolutely get on it. Absolutely get on it. Dr. Zagon over and over and over has told people it cannot and will not hurt you. I mean, it's a natural chemical that your body already produces. We just don't produce enough of it. And this is what I tell people when I talk to them. It's not. If it was something that they were not 100% certain of as far as any of the long-term effects or anything, then I think I would be a little hesitant, because I would feel bad telling somebody to get on something and then 5, 6 years down the road have something dramatic happen to them. But whenever I talk to people, I tell them, you have absolutely nothing to lose by getting on it. If anything, if you don't get on it, you've lost possibly the chance of stopping the progression of your disease. And I always tell people, when I talk to people, I always ask them what where they're at in their disease progression. And if people are early symptoms, boy, I strongly urge for them to get on it, because I am a definite firm believer that if you get on it when you're first diagnosed at the slightest symptoms, you're not going to get any worse. And I tell people also that, there have been cases where people have been in a wheelchair and they have gotten out of a wheelchair. Of course, everybody's different, but why would you not want to take something that won't hurt you at all, and you have nothing to lose by trying it? Try it for 6 months, and if it doesn't do anything, you haven't really lost anything. At least you've given it the opportunity. And if you haven't taken it, and if you don't know that it's helped you, and you get worse, you've lost that opportunity. So I whenever anybody emails me or whenever I talk to anybody, I tell them, go for it, take it. It won't hurt you to take it. And if you don't take it, there's a good possibility that you're gonna miss out on something great.
And could you explain what your symptoms are now, Vicky?
I don't have any symptoms. I don't have any symptoms. Like I said, we have a boat in the summertime. My husband and I are on our boat every single weekend. Before, if I go out and if it was hot and I'd sit outside for 5 minutes, I'd have to come in and lay down. The heat just really, really affected me. I do fine in the heat. I do fine under stressful situations. I mean, it's almost as though I've never had MS. Sometimes I even have to, I have to tell myself, wow, you have MS. But I don't have any symptoms. And I think I'm very, very fortunate. It's unfortunate that, that there are people out there that, that are on it, because I have a very good friend, Anthony, who, he is on the LDN, and he still is affected by, what the MS had done to him prior to getting on LDN.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as any progression, he hasn't progressed.
Oh, that's good. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add before we finish?
Well, I think the big thing is, just with everything that's happening in our poor old country, and just with everything that's going on with the economy and everything, I really wish that more doctors would give LDN a chance, because I firmly believe that LDN will stop the progression, and I think that LDN is a huge benefit in a person's life. And I think, like I said, with everything that's going on, that people are having to face day in and day out, with the economy and and losing jobs and losing houses, I just think that being on LDN, I think, is a safeguard. And I think with everything that we're having to deal with, and having to deal with your health, and having to deal with everything else, people have to get on LDN, and doctors need to recognize it. They don't realize that by not putting a patient on LDN, they're contributing to so many other factors, along with everything else that we have to deal with. And this is only something that's positive and that can help people more and more and more. And it's frustrating that more doctors aren't going down this route, with cancer patients, Crohn's patients. They could give so much more back to people.
Well, you've done some wonderful work raising money for getting a trial underway. Would you like to explain that, Vicky?
Well, after I got on, after I got on the LDN, and after I saw what it did for me, I mean, I was flabbergasted that nobody did anything. And no, I don't mean that nobody did anything in the regards of trying to bring awareness to it.
Hmm.
I just couldn't figure out why why no drug companies, or why nobody would do any clinical studies until after I started doing the research myself and finding out that there was no money in it and that nobody was going to touch it. So I told my husband, I said, I'm going to do a fundraiser. And we had done small ones in the community that I live in. We had done small ones within the community ourselves. And so I thought, you know what, I've got a bunch of girlfriends. I've got a lot of support. One way or another, we're going to pull this off. And that's when I met Sammy Jo, and she was a great, great help to me. And that's when I met you,
Hmm.
and I met Destiny. And then I had, the privilege of actually speaking with Dr. Zagon. And I thought, you know what, with all these great people, that I can't lose. So we worked. It took about a year. It took about a year to get everything all together and and to pull it off. But best time of my life. That was the best time of my life, was doing that, because I knew that we were doing something good and it was going to help a lot of people.
And how far did you walk, Vicky?
Um, that I did. That was about 2.5 years after I did the fundraiser, because
Hmm.
I was still frustrated because I didn't think enough was done, and I knew that the drug companies weren't going to touch it, and so I thought the only people that would even maybe remotely give this a chance would be people in the sports industry, the entertainment industry, because you always hear about them donating and giving to all these different charities and everything. And so Governor Schwarzenegger, of course, being in the entertainment industry, I thought, you know what, I'm going to walk to the Capitol. So I plotted out. I drove it first, and then I plotted out, where I could walk, and I walked 56 miles from my house to Sacramento, and met with two of his top officials. And I I was a little, after I left, I was disappointed. To be honest with you, I was disappointed because the one guy that I spoke with, the one gentleman that was there, his mother had Crohn's, and I told him, I said, you know what? I said, you really, really need to get your mom on this drug. And I could just tell by our conversation that he wasn't even that wasn't even something that he was even going to consider. And I just thought, shame on you. Here, your mom, a perfect person, your mom with Crohn's. Why would you not go straight to Governor Schwarzenegger and, talk to him about this, and see if there was any way that he could possibly help. But unfortunately, nothing came about of that. And then when they had that international in October, they had the International LDN Awareness Week. I actually went and spent the whole day at the Capitol. I had a big sign. It was, I forget who wrote it, but it was, the caption of it was something about a drug that there's a drug out there, you won't hear about it. Nobody will tell you about it. And I
That
made
was
this
Chris
big
Kerr, I
sign.
think.
Yeah, yeah, and I made this big sign, and I had it in front of me, and I had a bunch of, I had a bunch of handout and brochures, and I handed it out to people. But it's tough. It's really tough to get to those types of people. When Patrick Swayze was dealing with his pancreatic cancer, I actually, and I don't know how this happened, but I actually spoke to Patrick Swayze's sister-in-law. She was one of the researchers in Houston at Texas. She worked at the Houston Oncology Center. And I actually spoke with her, and I told her, I said, you know what? I said, and I tried to get her in touch with Dr. Zagon, but she was really against the LDN. And I asked her if she'd ever read anything on it, and she said no. And I directed her to the sites, and I told her, I said, just read the science. I said, read the science. I said, there is a lot of science. I said, there's like 25 years of science behind it. And I said, and that's how Dr. Zagon started out, was with pancreatic cancer. And I kind of just got the feeling from her that she just, she wasn't interested. And one of her comments to me was that was, that she didn't want to interfere, that was kind of something that her sister and Patrick had to kind of come to terms with themselves as far as the treatment. And I thought to myself, that's a family member. Why would you not butt in and tell her, say, look, I found this research. I definitely think that, especially in the position that he was in, I mean, he was unfortunately dying, and it wouldn't have hurt him to try it anyway. If it would have given him, a little bit more quality of life, hey, his wife had more time with him. But she just wouldn't, she just wouldn't go for it. And I, like I said, that was really, really shocking. I mean, that was really shocking. And I have another girlfriend who has Crohn's real bad, and she wanted to get on the LDN, and her gastro doctor was totally against it. And she asked me if I would call him, and I told her, I said, yeah, but I said, I don't know if he'll talk to me. Well, he talked to me. I was really surprised that I even got through to him. And I asked him if he had read the Crohn's study in the American Journal of Gastroenterology. And he said no. And I asked him, I said, well, have you seen the journals? And he said, oh, yeah. He said, I get them quite frequently. And I asked him, I said, well, you haven't read the Crohn's study? And he said no. And I said, why? He said, well, to be honest with you, I just don't have the time. And I said, well, do you really know anything about LDN and what it's done? And he said no. And so I started to tell him. And I told him, I said, I'm really, really surprised that, that you being in the position that you're in, that you wouldn't have read this research and at least tried it on her. I said,